Leta, do you think you can introduce the podcast?
And Leta, that's my mom, dad's human being. Yeah, good.
Kenneth, that is Leta's version of introducing people on the podcast. Thank you so much for coming on Leta's Tap Styles and My Autistic Life. I would introduce you, but the computer AI systems are convinced when I introduce our guests that I must also be AI. So do you mind introducing yourself so this gets labeled as, like actual human content?
Oh yeah, no problem, no problem. Ken Mims. I'm the founder of NERC, Neurodiversity Education Research Center. We operate a private middle school, STEM school for students who are neurodivergent, and based out of Phoenix, Arizona. And I'm an educator about 25 years, and just became passionate about autism and neurodiversity, and it has been a wonderful, wonderful experience. Over my career, both well, I can't just say wonderful. It's been an experience, but I've been grateful and thankful, both personally and professionally.
It is rare to hear someone go, I'm dealing with autism education, and not the next words out of their mouth being like, I work with public schools and I deal with IEPs. So can you explain a little bit more about what your schools are all about?
Oh Lord. Okay, that's a good question. That's a mom's question. That's a veteran's question right there because I have a story. I've been in education 25 years, and it wasn't until I was in a meeting with a parent who had a child who's autistic, a mom specifically. And, I was a science teacher. My background was in physics. So I love science and just going over everything, the data and the test scores. And the mom just wasn't impressed. And she just looked at me and said, yeah, this is nice, Mr. Mims. But I took my child to the movie theater over the weekend, and their child may have been in 10th grade. And, I took my child to the movie theater and gave them $10 or $20 to see how they would, respond by, purchasing the ticket. And when they gave the person at the counter the money, their child just skipped off. And the mom just looked at me like, I'm concerned about, like transitioning into adulthood. Like, and I just was at first as an educator, I just was like, I don't know, like I just realized that as educators, we're disconnected from reality. We're in our own, reality, but really to understand what a parent needs, what a mom needs, what a child needs. And it just made me realize that, oh, here's a disconnect, and having more empathy, understanding, a desire, a respect, a valuing, love, those type of things is really needed. And unfortunately, within the machine, the matrix, and whatever you want to call them, bureaucratic systems, public schools, unfortunately, it just doesn't permit that. I mean, and so, when we talk about specifically the special education, where you have individualized education plans that are federally governed, or, their legal contracts, I think school systems I've found is more concerned about, the legality. And so that creates, a host of other challenges. If you don't have legal representation, or you don't have, a posture that you understand the law, that you can get a lawyer, it's a lot of injustice going on, unfortunately. But more importantly, from my standpoint, there's a lot of potential in the lives of children, that are just not being reached due to a current model, in school systems. So I used my teacher retirement and created a school, that I just thought, was good work from research-based, models that I've, observed and used over the years. And the foundation is a micro school model, a smaller learning environment that's just positive and it just has love.
You look like you had something to say, and I couldn't tell.
I mean, all I was faking is, and all my dance teachers couldn't sort this thought process. I suppose that would have helped my life severely. It made me feel less creeped out because I overstepped boundaries, always using my middle name. But
Yeah, but I have a unique journey though. I have a unique journey, so everybody just doesn't have, certain experiences to put them in a position to connect the dots and see. But yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right.
you mentioned two things, and then I want to get into your journey. Potential of kids and love. And Leta has never had an IEP because I was definitely the mom going, let me remove her from the system because I've worked with the system too long on the, and I work with getting IEPs straightened for military families across the country. And people are like, I bet it's better in this state. And I'm like, no, no, it is not.
Oh, wow.
But it is rare to hear any educator say the potential and love and respect of these kids. They get so in the weeds on, oh my gosh, I have to follow this IEP. I think sometimes they fail to see the child in front of them. How has coming at it from a different perspective of coming at it from the love perspective changed how you're approaching education?
Yeah. I mean, when I discovered, so I got exposed to autism from a science standpoint. I was a science teacher. I had a kid ask a high level question. I'm like, oh, who's this guy? Then I found out he was diagnosed with autism. Never heard of it before. I started studying, autism while I was working on a master's degree. So I became what they call broad field certified. I became certified to teach every science subject in every grade level. And I was doing research for some of my classes on autism, and I discovered that the characteristics reminded me of myself, but also my peers in the physics community, like my professors, my graduate students. And so later on, years later, I realized like I was exposed to autism from a strength-based perspective, which is totally different from the average child or family or individual. And so autism is presented as a deficit or a disability and a weakness. But I didn't see it like that. And so that kind of distorted my perception of reality in a good way, because, I saw like potential, I saw value, and I just was like, and I just saw something. And so, I think that's one of the biggest things, but from an IEP standpoint, and you're right. I feel I have reservations of saying it as an educator. It's almost like a gang where you don't say you're not supposed to say certain things. I'm sure that you kind of feel that way when you're in IEP meetings with teachers. It's like you don't say, you don't just, but, I don't know, so from a professional standpoint, and I think my personal life, created that. But, yeah, there's some opportunities to change things on a legislative standpoint, on a policy standpoint, that will open up, some doors and change some systematic things specifically when it comes to autism, because I could talk about that for hours.
We will probably have to have you back on to talk about that for hours.
Yeah.
This one's going to sound weird, but coming from a physics and math background myself,
Yeah.
I know we used to joke as a few people found out I was autistic, had been diagnosed with autism and ADHD young. They're like, oh, you're neurodivergent. And I'm like, no, you need to go see people because I think you're so much like me. You are not neurotypical. And the joke used to be that if you were neurotypical, you were the weird one out in our physics department.
Yeah.
How did being around, like you said, you were around all these physicists, how did that kind of change your perspective when, like, you started realizing, oh, these guys are all not normal. We're just all our own version of weird.
Yeah. So there used to be a saying, it's not rocket science, right? I don't know if you remember that. Like, so, but I used to, in my mind, I just be like, well, I'm a physicist. Like, this is just how, I just think in a certain way. So I kind of like just, I don't know. I didn't, how can I say? I just thought I was a scientist. I didn't think I was, neurodivergent or had, any social or emotional, like, delays or areas of growth, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, cause like I was talking to somebody about like, scientists that study light. If you look at like Einstein, study light, like George Washington Carver, study the peanut, their whole life. Their whole life. I mean, if you just look at the average researcher, like, taking physics, I mean, they're just studying like the most minute detail their whole life. The wiring of the mind, the brain is, it's not a weakness. I just didn't look at it like a weakness. I looked at it as I don't want to say superpower because that's kind of cliche now, but it's a strength. It's a huge strength. And so I just saw the value in it. So yeah, but when you start to look at like outside of like professional capacities, outside of like work, you just start looking at like social and emotional stuff, like responses to like marriage and dating and that type of stuff. You can quickly see some triggers that show like the other side of these good.
I used to joke with my husband's professors because he's trained in geology, and they would be sitting there going, "We're normal." And I'm like, "You guys study rocks for a
You
living."
people like rocks. You people keep stopping on the side of the road for rocks. You people literally jump off of a cliff for rocks. Like, yeah? It's like if you're off of a cliff, would you jump off of a cliff? And the sentence simply to hear is, don't jump off a cliff just because you want to look at the pointy rocks. It's not that.
I never thought
We're
about
not
it from
saying
that
just for the
perspective.
pointy rocks.
Yeah, I never thought about it. Just they love looking at rocks. That's funny.
We were out with his professor one day looking for ash, because that was my husband's still of taking me on our first date was, "Hey, I've got to go do a field study. You want to come?"
Hey.
Like, and everyone in his department's like, "Oh, that's a great first date." And I'm like, "Guys, this is not normal outside of science. Hey, do you want to come to my, help me do my field study?" Not normal. And they're like, it is, right?
Hey.
And his professor like just was gung-ho and super excited and acting like a little kid because he'd figured out he had been wrong. And I'm like, normal people, because I've dealt with normal people, they're not super excited when they find out they've been wrong because now they have all these new papers to write.
Yeah. And it's funny you say that. I mean, so the science for me was just like the glue. I wouldn't have went down this path, particularly, for the students who are neurodivergent. But it's science, the commonality. I love science. The students love science. We had a common love. And that just is what, just provide a solid foundation. And that's what keeps things going. This love, this curiosity.
Did want to touch a little bit on, you've got a new book out on The Mother's Guide to Autism, which being a scientist is slightly different than like some of the books I was given when she was a kid that I'm like, these are great kindling that were like, you need to mourn your child because they will never be perfect.
Sorry, you mean the breathing, living thing in front of everybody's eyes? That's breathing and living. And if that's not a child, then that's a ghost, and then we have to question whether or not this house is haunted now.
It was more that your child's not neurotypical, and where I was like, yay, she's neurodivergent. I can handle this.
Yeah.
Most parents, their first time sometimes even really hearing the word autism, except outside of like The Good Doctor or whatever new autistic character there is on TV.
Just not accept that whatever the hell that is. We just do not accept its existence. Although if teaching show, no, not in any part of that department. No, not on the doctor part, not on the autism part, not the doctor part. We ignore that existence.
She's heard me get upset at people who are like, "Oh, I've watched The Good Doctor," or "Oh, I've watched The Big Bang Theory. I now know all about autism."
No, you don't, you moron.
Yeah, I've referenced, what was it? The Big Bang, but young Sheldon in a talk that I did, I referenced it. So in young Sheldon, they really didn't get into anything, but it highlighted, some social emotional gaps, but he was bright. And so I just highlight the aspect because people don't know that autism has nothing to do with intellectual, like IQ. Like and really nobody really people don't really get that, and actually some people can have on average above average IQ. And so that's an interesting piece that that people don't know. So I don't know. We still have a long ways to go.
What would you want a mom to know of a kid who's they've just got that diagnosis and their child is possibly crazy like my husband and playing with rocks and stopping in the middle of the street to look at rocks?
Yeah.
Or they're, a physicist and they can't stop discussing how atoms can be split.
Yeah.
And they're concerned about their child.
Yeah.
She's laughing because she's had parents go this way, and she's like, your kid might become a scientist, just get over it.
You should just be more concerned if it becomes a scientist, because then you need life. It will just die quicker if it becomes a scientist. Just trying to make sure it doesn't become a scientist, you shall be good.
All the scientists she knows are research scientists.
They almost
and they
die every freaking Tuesday, and Monday, and Wednesday, and every day.
Well,
and most of
At
them
some
are.
point, if they don't end up in the grave, I'll be
no,
surprised.
I know. Listen, but I agree. I actually agree with what you're saying. Coming from the educator standpoint and talking all that stuff, and then realizing, talking with moms, like you really need to focus on that social emotional piece. You need to focus on that living piece. Like just real life. Like school is fine, it's great, but it's not. Particularly kids who are who are autistic or neurodivergent that need that social emotional development and support. You can't get it from school. So that's where going back to like that public school model. In no form or fashion does public school provide. I mean, listen. I mean, just be honest. It's unsafe. We look at the stories. It's traumatic. It's traumatizing. Just the thought of going to school for many is like from this. It's what we watch. It's unfortunately that's the reality of this day and time, right? And so, from an individual who needs support socially, emotionally, like that environment is not the place. But I'm just saying, the point I'm just trying to say is for mothers, you're right. First of all, I would say, I don't want to say there's hope, but I do have to say that because many times, this aspect, like information that's presented is like the end, and it's challenging. But staying positive, being around good people that believe, that's probably one of the biggest thing I found with parents, for moms. And that was the purpose of the book, just that belief, believe in your child, find people that believe in them, cancel out the noise. I look at moms as superheroes. And the reason why I say that is because there's battles, and parents and moms many times are on that front line battling. And so the book is just meant to be a guide, support to identify, those challenges and just provide, inspiration and tools. But yeah, just hope, strength, because it is a battle. And sometimes, yeah, you got to kick butt. But at the same time, you all that fighting, you gotta you gotta rest. Also, you can't be in that kind of fight all the time. And you said something that was so right on. And this is what I said. And I think if you're in a situation like with school or public schools, and it's just and it's not the right fit, and you're advocating and arguing for your rights, sometimes it's just best to leave. Because if you're always fighting for what's right, you may just be dealing with be in the wrong relationship. You know what I mean?
She was in private school even when we got really upset because she had a private school that kept losing her. And I'm like, I am paying too much money for you to lose my child.
I mean, I only almost got hit by a car 4 times, and so.
They also may have accidentally left her behind at the Southern New Mexico State Fair. They forgot they had her.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
And I am definitely, I mean, having fought for other people's kids, I'm like, and I will remove her for my sanity and she can be homeschooled. And people were like,
I got rides and treats though.
a small town, the sheriff's department was called and they called me going, we have Leta and we have her hyped up on sugar. Do you want her back? And I'm like, this seems like a you consequence now. But she was nonverbal, so it was lucky that the sheriff's department knew exactly who she was.
Oh, yes.
Because the magician they had left her with was traveling into the area, and he's like, does anyone know who this kid belongs to? But
I forgot they left me on stage.
they looked down. It was time to leave. They forgot she was on stage doing stuff. And I've talked to other parents who were like, well, I would be upset, but I don't think I would have gone, okay, well, I guess we're homeschooling. And I'm like, you have that choice. You can move.
Yeah, you have a choice, and that's the beautiful thing about, more and more, every day, just having that choice, homeschool.
I do think sometimes moms get overwhelmed and they've got so many people who claim they're experts.
Yeah.
And they may not be experts. And then I'll talk to the mom and go, have they seen this paper or this paper? Because, of course, I go down the rabbit hole of papers. If you're going to tell me something, there's a paper out there for me to double check you on.
Yeah.
And the moms are like, but I can't. They're the teachers. I have to do what the teachers want. And I'm coming from totally outside the educational world, little academia, but I'm coming in with the Pentagon and Congress backing me going, hi, yeah, I could listen to you, but here's all the papers.
Yeah. That's a kind of interesting point, though, because, educators aren't really, they're experts when it comes to standards, math, science, the core subject standards. And hopefully, teaching instructions, instructional strategies, those type of things, assessment development, curriculum design. But when it comes to this specialization in social and emotional, development and support, I have to be honest and say, no, this is something that that I learned totally outside through more psychology, and understanding, how the mind works, how behaviors, excuse me, are established, and then, the emotional piece, And so schools and educators are not the experts when it comes to social development is the reality. That's not so. And we just have to be honest. And even the experts that's in the school system, like sometimes you may have behavior therapists, but they don't operate in the same capacity as the medical environment. So you may have that type of support. Even speech and OT, they don't operate in the same capacity as a medical or clinical setting in the public environment, but maybe in the private.
She's only gone to private therapists, and even they were like, I'm like, hi, did you know there's papers on this? And they're like, really?
Yeah. It's just, it's just some gap. Unfortunately, there's some major gaps. And so I don't position myself necessarily as an expert. I really position myself more as a guide, and just to support parents. I think parents are the experts. They're definitely the experts. And they just need a little bit of maybe guidance and support on the journey.
And sometimes just a little reminder that they are the parents and they know stuff.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They know a lot of stuff.
What were you going to say, kiddo?
These experts be child-free and want to be child-free for the rest of their lives because apparently children are only paychecks that you need to pay for. And most of them dislike children. Most of them just see children as something they have to pay for, so another bill in their bank account. Experts if they're all child-free and single.
She's had a lot of therapists that were
experts
anti-kids.
if you're child-free and single and convincing a bunch of children you're teaching that they're only paychecks to pay.
But you touch on something. I know you're saying in a jokingly manner, but there's some systematic things. Even the reality that in the therapy model, most individuals that are technicians are young. Just the way that the model is created. And so the technicians are young, they're, and they don't really have that same ability perspective as like someone who is older with children who have that experience. And that's
She's actually,
consistent.
she's had some therapists who have told her that they are child free and they don't want kids.
Yeah.
And that's what she was talking about. Because she's like, why would a parent listen to someone who's like, oh, if I had kids, they'd ruin my life. And she's like, then I'm not listening to you about how to raise my child.
Also, why would you actively tell a child you're working with in a child environment that you don't like children because they would ruin your lives? Like, why would you work with children if you think having a child would ruin your life? Working with children.
Yeah, that's definitely unfortunate, but sometimes those things do happen. Yeah.
And even with the full SLPs and the full OTs, they don't have that science background that I think a lot of parents just automatically assume, well, they've studied autism. No, they've studied how to teach your kids speech. And I think a lot of moms feel like they have to give over that power to the experts. And they're like, well, they know how to teach my child. And it's like, but you know your child.
Correct. Yeah. You know your child, you know their strengths, you know their weaknesses, but also you bring up a really important point, which so socially and emotionally, that goes into like culture, and those cultural or social expectations are defined by you and your family in your household. So this is where your voice is really the dominant voice. We want our child to develop, so you have to play a role in the goals, and the expectations and the vision, because if you don't, and you're mute and you don't, it's not going to be connected to, your family and the potential that you see. So, but it's a journey, I've realized. And it takes a while sometimes for parents to just kind of come out of some of the emotional battles, from initial diagnosis to to years after, time, and then like you said, like kind of trusting and going with the flow, and then having challenges and then seeing and realizing this is not working out. So it's unfortunately a lot of time wasted, going through that on that.
And I think, I mean, like I said, I was lucky. I came in from the community. So there were a lot of times when I was butting heads with her care team. It was me going, hi, I know this is what it says to do, but you're not paying attention to this over here. And every now and then I'd go, I know my degree is only a PhD in quantum physics, and I obviously am not the smart one in the room, but would you like to explain that in smaller?
Yeah.
And I may have thrown that physics degree a couple times around. But like, she had a speech therapist who's like, we have to focus on the tone of her voice. And I'm like, she can't enunciate words.
That person can't say my first name and don't accept the boundary because I am not your child. Can you please stop using my middle name, and can you please stop trying to have a Latina accent? Please, it's just weird. Just weird. Freaking weird.
But
and disturbing.
I finally convinced them, you need to be working on the fact she can't say cat, and you're concerned her voice is too high pitched. One of these is important in life. And a few of the parents I've talked to at dance are like, wait, you can come in and go, hi, I cannot understand my child. Let's think this through.
Yeah. And yeah, you touch on something very important, because, most parents don't really realize that, don't know that. Even in school systems with IEPs, it's the same way. You have widespread meetings where it's the parents don't really understand. But I do notice, though, when parents have like an advocate, or they have an attorney, but particularly an advocate that the county knows, it's attention. What you like this? You want this? Oh, okay, yeah. And I'm just like, oh. But then other parents who don't understand their rights, don't know their rights, you know, they get kind of like what they call it, the wool pulled over their eyes or something, you know, like they just get the, so you're right. You're right.
We have a school system around here who's telling parents they don't get a copy of the IEP. And I'm like, hi, hand it over. And the parents are like, they didn't even bat an eye. And I'm like, yeah, because I've had 20 years of experience that when I walk through the door, I'm bringing the attorney. They don't want to speak to me. They want me
This,
out of there as quickly as humanly possible.
that's horrible. You know, like, yes.
At least I am not the attorney who's on a first name basis with their attorney. We do have an attorney in town that I am pretty sure his entire paycheck is based off that one school system.
Wow. Yeah.
But it's because, I mean, it goes back to they're not experts themselves and they come up with some of the dumbest things, not just with autism, where you're
Yeah.
like, hi, if we could just think this through.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you
Um,
seeing that in other places throughout the nation by chance?
There's a few school districts throughout the nation that it's like, just think this through because it's not that complicated.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes the parents are so convinced that the educators have gotten an education, they have not gotten on the science behind autism,
Correct.
that they give in because they're so overwhelmed with all this. And it's like, yeah. And then the educators are overwhelmed because what they're doing
Yeah.
isn't necessarily the best option out there.
Yeah. And I do have to say that I'm not trying to beat up on definitely teachers. You know, it's not their fault. You know, for the most part, you know, they don't design school systems. They don't design anything. You know, so there's a lot of factors that are just
They,
totally overwhelming.
I mean, it takes developmental pediatrician and behavioral psychiatrists 18 years to become an expert in
Yeah.
autism.
Yeah, and that is true.
You're not going to become an expert in autism in 4 years without those classes. I mean, the people who are experts are all autistic themselves, let's be honest. I mean, but you're talking neurologist, you're talking behavioral psychiatrist who went to get a psychiatry degree and then went on to get a degree on how behaviors actually work and then went on to get a degree in autism specific. That's your entire adult life practically before you go work with anyone.
Yeah, you're right
And
about
you
that.
can't expect teachers who are in school for like 4 years to even scratch the surface
Yeah,
of any of this. I had one teacher who's like, she honestly did not know how an AAC could help a child communicate, and no one had
yeah.
taken the time to explain to her what an AAC was. And so she had banned it from the classroom and couldn't figure out why the child wasn't speaking to her.
Oh, wow. Good
And the
Lord.
parents were like, but the teacher says it's distracting. And I'm like, what's more distracting here? Not talking to the child.
About what grade? What grade was that? What grade level?
It was kindergarten. It was the first,
What?
yeah, it was
Oh,
the
I
first
thought
AAC the teacher had ever seen. And she's like, well, she can just leave her iPad at home.
oh, wow. I thought it was more like middle school or high school. I mean, middle school was, but that's critical. That's, you know, fundamentally and foundationally very
Oh,
beneficial.
okay. But no one had bothered to tell this teacher, this isn't just a normal iPad this
Not
child is bringing.
parents. Okay, yeah.
And she thought she was doing what was best because she's like, well, screen time is bad. I'm like, yeah, assuming that's not how you speak to the world. And she's like, wait, what are you talking about? I'm like, do you even know what this is? I remember when I was in 3rd grade, I had a friend who was hard of hearing. I'm hard of hearing. Our teacher, she was more hard of hearing than me. Our teacher was returning grades and she tried to give her the okay sign, not realizing that that's okay in the hearing world. She just told my friend that she'd gotten an F on the test. But she hadn't ever been told that that's the okay signal for the hearing world. And the teacher was devastated,
Yeah.
going, no, you got an A+.
Yeah. Yeah, you bring up a point where, so when I started the school, we transitioned to a research center. And so the plan became taking the research and using the school as an opportunity to, provide documentation and evidence. And so we can leverage and advocate, and check and create policy or advocate for policy that would impact the whole nation. And, and so there's a need for research, and hopefully that will drive. But within school systems, not school systems, within education departments on universities that's preparing teachers, there's there's no content, around this, and when you talk about neurodiversity, there's no like legislation, codified from federal, state, local that recognizes the term, and let alone like teaching strategies and practices. So yeah, these are some of the major, systematic things that really, I look forward to see, change over the next, 5 to 10 years.
That's one thing I am annoying some of the parents, I think, because we're getting a lot of data out of the dance studio, and they're
Oh
like,
yeah.
"Well, what are you doing?" I'm like, I am calling friends up going, "Hi, would you like a paper? I don't have time to write it, and it's not my field." But like, we've got kids who are starting to speak after dancing for 3 months, and I'm like, okay, well, the evolutionary biologists are saying dance is a language. Maybe we could go a little further. And these parents are going to their teachers, and their teachers are like, "What's evolutionary biology?" And I'm like, that's what we, up at the college world call it.
That's interesting. I didn't think about that. Because at our school we use adaptive rec, program, and I use that from the beginning as far as like basketball was my sport, but we use it integrating it with like positive behavior support. And so like from a biological, physiological standpoint, and like a neurodevelopmental standpoint, that physical movement. Now you really have me thinking, we have to come out there and visit the studio or visit a performance. I would love to see it because I can only imagine what's going on.
And all the good studies being done on it are like over in Norway and Sweden and Denmark. And I'm like, could we get someone over here in the US to do this study?
Yeah, that's funny. I was in Sweden a couple of years ago, and I didn't even get time to do like research on autism and connect with anybody. But yeah, I can see
It's
that.
not even the autism researchers coming up with it. It's the evolutionary biologist. And I hate giving them their dues because, they're the baby science.
We're at 40 minutes. So they usually come up with a good chunk of stuff for humans in the medical fields. And this is just being sad at this point that the evolutionary biologist is coming up with more. This is how certain medical things work in the medical field. This is just sad at this point. This is just sad. But medical fields, their whole job is this.
She is used to hanging around a bunch of professors, so she gets to hear about that academia hierarchy.
Yeah. I mean, that's, you're touching on something very, very important, very important.
But I think it would be good to look into this, but these are papers that no teacher, they have way too much else on their plate. They're not going down the rabbit hole of, what are the evolutionary biologists saying about dance?
No, teachers just we don't have the bandwidth to do anything like that. But it's it's going to take groups. It's going to take, groups and associations. There should be some teacher associations that transition, into that space, and that could help advocate and support. We created some fellowship programs for teachers and provided them with instruction from instructional design standpoint. And we look forward to the transition to, beyond the instructional piece, academics.
So you were discussing the research part of everything. Can you go? I know we're starting to get towards the end of time, and we are definitely going to have you back again, Ken, if you're okay with it.
Oh yeah, please. I appreciate it. But just you wanted to talk about just the research piece?
Yeah, and like what that's all about and how that can be applied. I
Yeah.
know that's probably a whole podcast in and of itself.
Yeah, but just to summarize it, I was there's a program that's funded by the Department of Energy called Albert Einstein Distinguished Educators. And so it's a fellowship that's been around over 30 years, and it brings STEM educators to Washington, D.C. So I was able to participate in that program somewhere around 2021. And so I spent time on Capitol Hill as a legislative fellow and, got a lot of professional development. And I saw that there was a disconnect between the practice of education, research, and then policy and legislation. And so when I came back, I decided to take the organization to a slight pivot to a research center with the goal to, to take what we're doing, document it, publish, in our research and advocate, for policy, legislation, to have a larger impact. And so we were able to secure a National Science Foundation grant in partnership with Arizona State for a program that looked at computational thinking, instructional models for neurodivergent individuals. And that was great. We learned a lot, and we were able to be exposed to the research world. But now what we want to do is focus on one of our programs, which is a PBIS program that's integrated with therapy, that's behavior therapy, actually. But we have a unique model that we use in our school setting, and we want to look at the impact of how, like what you're talking about in your center, these practices and these, I don't want to say alternative, but I guess maybe they're based on science, but we know that it works. We're seeing the impact, we're seeing a change in our students, and so we want to document that. As well as continue with providing training and professional development for teachers and school leaders. And so there's the consideration of a traditional approach, but what we're realizing, and we talked about it, there's also a non-traditional approach that we have to take with this kind of movement, because the traditional approach is getting us what we currently have. So we don't want to be, too alternative, but we may do some different things. But also, we're in a position to just be ahead of the curve. So when we first started the school, the term neurodiversity didn't exist, and now, almost 10 years later, there's the word, the language, but more importantly, the perception, the beliefs, the understanding about capacities of individuals have changed. And also, from a mental health standpoint and a social emotional standpoint. And so we anticipate for the next 5 to 10 years that society will catch up, also and shift, and things will just naturally progress, to be in line, with our mission, our vision.
I am kind of curious, and this is just probably, the crazy scientist in me who's always curious about stuff. What would happen if we took the way we're teaching, like at the dance studio and the way you guys are finding stuff in the research center, and applied it to the neurotypical students? Would it, and that's just me going, maybe what we're doing is leading education into the direction it needs to be for all the kids.
Yeah, and in some aspects of it may just be a return to the original ways of educating, kids, which is, prior to, like the Industrial Revolution, prior to, large school systems where schools were more like, school, like homes, house, like, people had schools out of their house and had smaller, more intimate, and so, like, from a neurological standpoint, from a social emotional standpoint, you're able to build those, positive, like, connections and feel that energy. But when you talk about that dance, and I just didn't see it, I didn't think about it before, but the combination of the music and the movements, and then if you're singing, like you're tapping into something so positive. And I was reading a book today about that the benefits just of being in a positive environment as it relates to learning. So if you're in a positive environment like that, and then you infuse some type of learning, that's going to escalate. That's going to increase, the ability to learn compared to if you were in an environment where you were scared for your safety. It's unfortunate. All right. So, yeah.
I know I've annoyed a few of our parents because outside of the amazing strides their kids are making with speaking and like following instructions and stuff, a lot of times they are actually progressing in their dance studies faster than their neurotypical counterparts. And their parents will be like really excited they did something. And our dance teachers are like, hold that thought. That usually takes a neurotypical dancer 3 years to learn. And your
Yeah.
kid learned it in like 4 months.
Just let them be naive. I
Mhm.
keep telling you all, just let them be naive.
She's
Yeah.
just like, let the parents be naive. But
You
it's like,
people need to remember the difference between dance world and the rest of society. Or the difference between Congress world and the rest of society. And the only one reminding you there is such thing that still number wild sale.
but I've been wondering over the last like years we're looking at this, if having early class preschool and early fundamental dance classes, instead of having 10 to 25 5-year-olds in a class, if having 2 to 3 would make things a lot easier on the children learning.
Oh, yeah. I always advocate for the smaller environments, but I also I advocate for both. Like to maybe have those both opportunities. So the larger environment, then also that additional separate smaller environment. And so then that's what I call inclusion. Like so you want them to, that's the goal, the larger environment, right? But they just need some, maybe they benefit, from that, that smaller environment. And, whatever time it takes, if it takes a year, if it takes 5 years, if they never transition, okay, whatever, it doesn't make a difference. But just my whole philosophy is really just providing opportunities. That's all we could control as educators and as, trainers or coaches. Like that's all we can provide is an opportunity and a fair chance, for students to reach their potential. And like you said, when you give, what I've found is when you give, individuals that are neurodivergent a fair chance and a positive environment. Listen, I got too many stories, and I've seen some amazing things. I've seen some things, and I'm sure you've heard and seen it with your own eyes. There's some greatness. We're not talking about superpower. I mean, yeah, people say superpower, but it's some greatness. It really is. And once you see that a couple times, you know for sure, like, oh, this is something. This is something going on.
Oh yeah, and they may be crazy to the rest of the world, but something is going on.
My last
Some-
50 minutes.
She
If
is
you
my
don't
little
want this to go
producer.
an hour.
And you-
I mean, yeah, you raised me.
We would love to have you back on the show again if you're okay with it.
Yeah, I definitely. If before I go, can I add Leta one question?
Sure.
Leta, I noticed, you have a story, but one quick question. How do you remain so positive? How do you remain so positive?
I'm really good at dark humor.
Yeah. I have to work on humor myself. I need to get a little bit of that from.
I think sometimes, because she did grow up with people who, between the academia and her dad's military friends, she learned dark humor fixes everything.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
But before we let you go, can you tell people where to find out more about your work and where to find your new book?
Yeah. I'm located on kennethmims.com. You could just, go to the website, learn more information about my background, about the book. Actually, we have a free parent course and community that we've created, and I'm always, looking for the opportunities to speak. If you're ever looking for people looking for a speaker, I love talking about this work and just want to help people. And I appreciate you.
Well, we will have all that in the description below. Thank you again for your time today, Kenneth.
All right, thank you.
Hello, thank you for watching the podcast, and please subscribe and also look at the adorable paper. So if you want to subscribe for it, and also please leave a like. And don't forget, if you subscribe to us, that you won't miss any of our new podcast feeds. And also, did you see the adorable paper? Don't you like it?